Hello, welcome to Alec Cizak Television. Today I'm talking with David Copper, known to the writing and reading world as Copper Smith.
Mhm.
Copper, how are you doing tonight?
Hey, doing good. I'm doing good, Alec.
Can you tell my audience exactly who you are and what you do?
Who I am and what I do. Well, I am a writer of fiction. I guess I would describe what I do as a kind of hybrid of crime fiction and apocalyptic fiction. Um, yeah. Um, that's kind of what I do. I mean, I dabble in all different fields, but basically, I guess I would say that what I'm trying to do is take crime fiction into the post-apocalyptic world. That may be a
Hmm.
good way. Um, yeah, I mean, we can get more into that as we go along, but in terms of why I want to do that, but yeah, um, that's kind of what I'm trying to do, take it into the future. I mean, I guess you could say I'm kind of frustrated with the idea of people thinking of noir fiction, sort of crime fiction, as being something that's kind of frozen in time. They think of it as, oh yeah, that's those gumshoe detectives of the 30s and 40s and such. And I'm like, okay, well, let's take it into the post-apocalyptic world and see if we can continue to do that. You know, and of course, I mean, the other people have kind of done that. I mean, uh, you know, Philip K. Dick kind of did that a little bit, and other people. But yeah, that's basically what I do as a writer. That is what I do.
That is fascinating. We should definitely talk about that.
Yeah.
In fact, I think you have a series coming up, a post-apocalyptic crime fiction series after
Mm.
the smoldering. What can you tell us in advance about that?
Um, I guess the best way to describe it is a post-apocalyptic thriller. Um, and I guess where it differs from most post-apocalyptic is that the background of the protagonist is that he has a bit of a sort of crime fiction-y background. He's kind of he was an assassin basically, and
Hmm.
so now he's back in the, I guess, pre-apocalyptic. That's the right word. World. And so now he's kind of put into this new world and thrust into a different world where instead of going after people to kill, he's trying to survive and trying to use those skills in a different way, basically.
Okay, and you say that's going to be a series?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I've got three planned out right now, but you know, we'll see where it goes. We'll see.
Three novels or three stories or?
Three novels. Three
Oh,
novels.
all right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, I plan on having the prequel. I think I'm going to aim for later this month in terms of getting the prequel out. So we'll get a little bit of a glimpse of the main character's life. You know.
And by prequel, what do you mean? Like a short story or a
Yeah,
novella?
yeah, a short story that just gives you all the background and kind of takes you right up to a point where everything, till the world kind of goes dark, and brings us into the apocalypse, basically.
Can you tell us how this, by apocalypse, what exactly do you mean?
Well, I should warn you, by the way, that I tend to write kind of spontaneously. I don't necessarily plan things out, so it's hard. So I don't necessarily have all the details exactly planned out. But
Uh-huh.
so I don't. Um, well, I mean, it's basically, it's the end of the world has happened in terms of. I mean, obviously there are various ways that the world can end in these kinds of books. I mean, you've got the zombies, and you've got the climate change, and you've got all of that stuff. With this one, it's more. It starts out seeming to be a natural disaster, and then we later learn that there were some nefarious forces behind it. So the disaster wasn't entirely natural. Let's put it that way.
Ah, I see. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's kind of what I was getting at. Like, because sometimes apocalypse is biblical, and sometimes
Yeah,
it's because of a war, or But I see what you're saying.
yeah,
A,
yeah,
a questionable natural disaster.
yes, exactly. Unnatural disaster.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Which is not too difficult to imagine happening.
Oh no.
Real world.
I mean, when you consider just how sort of delicate the world is in many ways, I mean, how many it just, human, all it takes is one, couple of bad people with some bad ideas, and, you've got some
Well, it's
problems.
funny, and you talk about how fragile the world is. Who would have thought just a little virus would
Oh yeah, yeah,
completely radically change everything?
absolutely.
Everything.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah, and I mean, it's even crazier to think, I mean, what would have happened, 200 or 300 years ago when we didn't have the ability to kind of respond as we have, you
Mhm.
know. So, and you kind of imagine humanity kind of, I mean, it's kind of like you hear historians talk about in the very early, sort of in prehistoric world, that we now kind of live in a world where we think of the world kind of advancing every
Mhm.
more or less steady pace. But those early years, it was we were constantly resetting and going back to zero.
Mhm.
I'm sure viruses and all of that probably play a role in that kind of thing. And that might be maybe the post-apocalyptic world might look kind of like that, where it takes a while to get back to progress. So this is a real upbeat conversation we're having. Uh, you know.
Well, we don't write Hallmark cards.
Yes. No, we don't. No, we don't.
Um, yeah. Well, and when you put it that way, I guess the people complaining about wearing masks, maybe it'll put it into perspective for them that things
Yeah,
things could be a lot worse, right?
absolutely.
If people on the streets just bleeding out from the eyes or something.
Yeah, yeah. They could be worse, and they have been worse.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
we can take that into consideration and be like, yeah, maybe maybe put things in perspective. You know.
Yeah, they should maybe go back and watch some documentaries on the plague, right? I mean
Oh
that
yeah,
was, you know,
yeah. Hmm.
there you just threw grandma out on the cart as it rolled
Yeah,
by.
yeah, and that's another one of the weird things about it is because you wonder how much of all of the damage done was really just people not responding in a way that we now look back and think, oh yeah, that was obviously some stupid shit to do, but at the
Hmm.
time, hey, why not? Why not
Well,
put
and,
some?
and I don't know that we can be, even now, we can be all that thrilled with the way our country responded. There are other countries that are over it already, but
Yeah,
here we are, we're still struggling with it. Uh,
yeah, yeah,
it's weird.
yeah.
Well, let's talk about your short story, Unnamed Future,
Hmm.
which I got. It's currently available on Amazon, and I think I'm part of the choir the story is preaching to.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
I was just curious if you could go into a little bit what compelled you to write it.
Hmm. Okay. Wow. I don't remember the specific a specific motivation behind it, but I guess I don't know, maybe having read a little bit too much Orwell and Huxley and cats like that. I mean,
Mm.
uh, yeah, I mean, and I guess I was, um, I mean, I don't know if, and I guess I'll find out when I read your review of it, but um, I don't know if you got more of a vibe. Some people said, well, it's kind of like Orwell. I was thinking more along the lines of like Huxley in on like a Brave New World kind of a trip where it's a world that, I mean, with 1984, it's more of an explicitly totalitarian thing where everybody involved in it more or less knows that they are, that, I mean, I know they have all the slogans and and the Big Brother is watching you and all of that, but they more or less know that they are under a totalitarian state. There is no illusion that it's a happy situation. But with Brave New World and that kind of a thing, it's like they think they're, this is great. And and in some ways that's kind of what I was aiming for with that. With Unnamed Future, it was like I was basically imagining a world where we think this is a great idea. We think, hey, we want everybody to get along. We want everybody, we don't like division and we don't like people, fighting against, we don't like all the fighting from one side to the other. But, you know, maybe a little bit of disagreement might be a healthy thing, a little bit of allowing people to disagree and to go their own way. Um, Maybe enforced unity might not be such a good thing, basically. And so I know I haven't, I mean, it's such a short story. I don't know if I want to give too much of it away in terms of the storyline, but basically it's a future, sort of near future, where they find a way to, let's say, surgically enhance. It's a surgically enhanced unity. Let's put it that way. Surgically manufactured kind of a unity, uh, and they basically, and there is a drug that people can take. And there may have been a little bit of Philip K. Dick influence with that, but yeah, there's a drug that enables people to kind of escape that unity and develop a personality of their own. And the protagonist takes the drug and undergoes some changes, and the fun ensues after that. Um, so yeah, you know, let people check it out
Um,
where it goes after that. Hmm.
yeah, well, and there's, Philip K. Dick just and Huxley, I think, just accidentally, or maybe they were very aware of what they were doing, predicted the use of drugs to manipulate behavior.
Right.
And I just think if in writing this kind of fiction, that sort of thing just comes naturally.
Right.
You said something that I thought was interesting. Do you think it is better to be aware or unaware if you're living in a
Hmm.
dystopia, or just whatever, correct?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's better to be aware because you can't
Mm.
really act against it. I mean, I guess it's also, and I wasn't consciously thinking this, but you could say maybe there's a matrix element of, red pill, blue pill. Do you know that you're sort of being manipulated, or, take this pill and find out the truth about it? Um, but yeah, it's I would say it's better to be aware. Yeah, sure how you would feel about that. I mean, but yeah, I mean, you could say causing people to be unaware is in some ways the the worst kind of manipulation, right? And it could be considered the laziest, because then you don't need these big armies and whatnot. So I don't.
Well, without steering things too much toward the real world, although it's very difficult with this kind of fiction,
Yeah.
um, it seems like that's the people in charge, people with all the power.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like they are a little lazy, aren't they? That
Yeah.
they kind of want an unaware
Oh,
population.
right. Right. Exactly.
It's cheaper too.
Yeah.
Army is expensive,
Right.
right?
Right.
I don't know, but you're right. As a citizen,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I don't know. That's a tough question because
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we are a little bit in a dystopian society right now,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and and I feel like the people who are aware of it are constantly mocked and derided,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of people who just going. I can't even tell if they're aware that they're going along with it,
Right.
if they are brainwashed, or if maybe they're smarter than me and maybe they know exactly what's happening,
Right.
but they know it's easier to get along
Mm-hmm.
if you just conform. You just say, okay, I'm just gonna,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Hmm.
I don't know. I've had this discussion before with writers.
Mm-hmm.
You reach, and I think a lot of writers do this. You reach a level of intelligence um, where it becomes difficult to conform.
Right. Right.
And you get to that place, and after a while, you question whether or not it was a good idea to get to that place.
Hmm. Yeah. I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Yeah. I mean, because, yeah. I mean, there's certain things you kind of think, I wish I could be the 19-year-old that kind of believed everything that he was told. I mean, it would be easier to be that guy. You know. So I don't know. But then you think, I mean, it's like you go back to the Soviet Union. I mean, the guys that were holding the machine guns, they were fine. I mean, they supported. They didn't have any problems because they knew the machine guns weren't pointed at them. The
Yeah,
tanks were coming for them. Um, so yeah, it's for them. It wasn't. You could say it wasn't a dystopia. It wasn't a totalitarian. Well, it kind of was, but I don't.
yeah.
Hmm.
That opens another can of worms there. I've never even thought about that, like what it's like to be on the other end of on the
Right.
good end of the of the firing squad.
Yeah.
uh, I guess that's a little bit of a selfish thing on my part to only try to consider the
Hmm.
person who gets shot.
Hmm.
But I wonder what kind of pain, or if any, that the shooter goes through.
Right. Right. Hmm. I
You
don't know.
know, what,
I don't know.
yeah, that's rough. I'm going to ask you a question
Sure.
that I was asked on an interview many years ago at a university. This student, much younger woman,
Hmm.
read my book Manifesto Destination, which has been called dystopian, even though it takes place in 1999.
Hmm.
Um, and she said, "I'm asking you this question.
Hmm.
The question was annoying to me, so I'll just let you know in advance it's an annoying question."
Sure.
Um, she said, she said the great dystopian novels have been written. Why continue writing
Hmm.
dystopian fiction?
Wow. Have they been written? I don't know that they have.
That's
I mean,
one answer.
I I guess the simple answer is sort of. I mean, look, if it's if you're writing Brave New World, you're not really writing about the future. You're writing about the 1930s, basically, right? If you're writing 1984, you're not really writing about 1984. You're writing about 1949 or whatever it was. So yeah, every age kind of needs, I don't know if you're familiar with the movie THX 1138. Yeah, um, Gary, you know what his name is, Star Wars.
George Lucas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was right. I mean, it's, that was a movie for anybody that hasn't seen it. It's about, dystopia where everybody has to shave their head because obviously it was the long-haired hippies and they can't listen to music because, rock and roll was a thing that people were scared of and all of that. That was really about 1969 or whatever it was. So yeah, every age, I guess, kind of needs its thing. Now, I wasn't consciously thinking about writing that. I was sort of reflecting this particular age, but I'm sure, I mean, you know how it is. I mean, sometimes subconsciously, whatever you're living through just kind of pours out of you, whether you were thinking of it or not. So yeah, every age kind of needs its own dystopia, is what I'm saying.
You want to hear the answer I gave?
Yeah.
I told her, I said, because the masses are too stupid to listen to the warnings, so we keep having to give them the warnings again.
Okay, that's a pretty good answer too.
Yeah. No, your answers are good, and it's true. It's funny. I never really thought about THX
Right.
reflecting the '60s so much, but I guess you're right. The shaved heads and that's such an incredibly bleak movie. It's hard to believe that's the same guy, you know,
Oh, yeah.
who eventually had Yoda sitting in a boardroom.
um, well, and I guess my understanding of it is that that didn't make any money, so he just said, "Okay, we'll we'll change the plan up a little bit and start doing some things that are going to sell some action figures, I guess." So that may be a little bit of what was happening there, but yeah, that was probably, yeah. You could see it a little bit. I mean, I saw it a couple of times, THX, and then kind of realized, okay, that's what was happening at that time. Yeah.
Yeah. So now I'm just extending that idea. Um, Blade Runner in the early '80s.
Mhm.
It's I want to say it's an anomaly. It's an anomaly, but it's not really. Blade Runner came out the same day as we're really off track, but that's okay. Blade Runner came out the same day as The Thing, Carpenter's The Thing,
Right.
two extraordinarily bleak movies,
Mhm.
but right on the heels of E.T. And I think
Right.
maybe Spielberg under as kind of cheesy as he is, he understood uh, the way people were thinking at that point. I think people had you had the '60s and the '70s, and I think you had a lot of people who said enough.
Right. Right.
Let's have a positive outlook. Let's stop being such downers. You know,
Right.
uh,
Right.
it's
Hmm.
weird.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
well, yeah, I could talk about dystopian fiction all day, and it's frustrating to me that we do have to keep writing it,
Yeah.
that the message is not getting through.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it seems like, in fact, every time the system or whatever you want to call it fights back,
Mm-hmm.
It's a harder push. You know, it's a we the masses get shoved further into a kind of corner that it's almost. I mean, now it seems almost impossible to get out of. I mean, um, it's weird because everyone I talk to, when I talk to people in person, not on social media necessarily, but in person,
Mm-hmm.
we all, it doesn't matter what our politics are, we all kind of agree things are amongst just on the ground level where the 99% are,
Mm-hmm.
things are not the way they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it seems like uh, the forces that are shutting down any kind of meaningful debate and their minions amongst us, amongst the 99%, because they've got a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it seems like they've got a death grip at this point.
Hmm.
Because the people that I talk to, they all agree this is not the way it's supposed to go,
Mm-hmm.
but nobody's really doing anything about it.
Hmm.
Nobody's really standing up. The few times anybody with any kind of power, if a Bill Maher or Bill Burr stand up and say something, they're
Mm-hmm.
shouted down so fast. It's I just somebody just said on one of my videos, they said it's too late. I said it's too late. You know that it's over.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, I mean, do you think it's more sort of Orwellian or Huxleyan? I mean, do you think it's more imposed explicitly or more okay? You can be because I think it's more Huxleyan in the sense of people are comfortable and you know, I mean, even people who are considered relatively poor are I mean, they can watch cable TV and they can watch Netflix and they can eat, whatever they want. And, I don't know, you know?
well, and I mean this, the food that that is available to those who
Right.
don't have a lot of money
Mm,
is
mm,
designed specifically to
mm,
placate.
yeah.
It's
Mm,
in my most dire moments, what I lived on was Hostess Twinkies and Ho Hos at the 7-Eleven and a jug of milk.
right.
Um,
Right.
and I'd eat that, and my belly would feel full, and the sugar and whatnot would send the endorphins and whatnot, all the right chemicals, and I would think for a moment, okay, I'm good. This,
Right.
this, I
Yeah.
couldn't, yeah.
I mean,
Um, but
200 years ago, you would have been eating stuff that it tasted like crap, and you'd be like, I got to move on. I got to get away from this and, find a way to improve this situation. Yeah.
yes, um, and to go back to your question, I think that um, I really think it's a wonderful hybrid of everything. I think one of the dystopian books that doesn't get mentioned enough is Fahrenheit 451,
Okay.
where
Yeah. Yeah.
he says in the book, the government didn't need to burn the books; the people were willing to do it.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
that's with the social media problem. I
Hmm.
think that's where we're at. That
Right.
you have people that are just willing uh, to do it for the government. Government again, it's a lazy government. They just
Right.
social media does it for them. I think
Mm,
that we're in a interesting situation where the government is really beholden to international corporations and to big tech now. It's who
right.
has the money, they control the politicians. So we can't even say the government anymore. I
Right.
think I think it's kind of a waste of time to rail against the government because I think they're all pawns.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
now I forgot my train of thought. Oh, and there's within the debate, there's lots of distractions because I think, for instance, very recently we had this nonsense about Dr. Zeus. Those 6 books that Dr. Seuss's family decided to pull, I'd never heard of them. I'd never heard of them. And but you have it's strange. You have the people that are supposedly the right or the conservatives going ballistic over that.
Mm,
And it was a decision made by the family. And I find it's like a smokescreen. Like that's not the important battle there.
right.
Those books, if you look at what's inside them, it's obviously dated. There's nobody's going to be teaching. I hope nobody's going to be teaching that to their children.
Right.
Um, it's like that's not the hill to die on.
Right.
Just similarly with the masks,
Mm,
where they get upset about the masks, and I'm like, why are you wasting time with that? Just put on
mm,
the mask, like
yeah.
this virus takes out two of your five senses, and
Mm,
you're gonna make a fuss about a mask
mm, right.
versus your lungs being permanently scarred for the rest of your life.
Mm, mm,
Um,
mm,
so there's a lot of
yeah.
smoke screens in front of it.
Mm,
So I can't really commit to is it a Huxley or an Orwell because
right.
I mean you're right that there's that comfort level with I've always looked at the way they use drugs to
Mm,
to placate the masses. If you're a sad person, and look, depression is real.
oh, yeah.
I know that depression is real, but I sometimes wonder if chemicals is the way to deal with it. And again, for anyone out there who uses antidepressants, if it works, go with it.
Right.
But it does seem like it's come from that line of thinking, of Huxley's line of thinking. But we have the manipulation of language,
Oh,
and that we saw in Orwell's book, and we have um, the changing of headlines.
mm,
Now the internet can just change anything. There are things that I heard about before the internet that now the internet insists is not true.
mm,
It's like, well, what is it? And you see the definitions of words change. If you go to Google Dictionary, a lot of definitions of words are very different
mm,
from an old Webster's dictionary.
right. Right. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. A lot of it, I mean, with certain kind of change that happens, you could say that's organic, but
Mm.
when change is happening that quickly, you begin to think, I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, my father and his generation believed one thing, and now I am able to to look back and say, okay, I don't agree with that. But now we've got people rejecting things that they believed, 5 years ago,
Mm.
to the point where it's like, I mean, is that enough time to really think about it, or is that just, you're going with whatever the fashionable thing at the time is? I don't know. At a certain point, when it's happening that quickly, you wonder how much thought is being put into why we're shifting so quickly from one position to the next. Yeah,
Do, do you
yeah,
think that's related to technology? Because
yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
we're roughly the same age, and I
Mm,
remember like the leap from Atari 2600 to the first Sony PlayStation. That was
mm,
almost roughly 20 years. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying?
Wow.
Like,
Wow. Hadn't thought about it, how long that was, but yeah.
but then you look at the advance from PlayStation 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. I guess now there's a 5.
Right.
That's also about 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the
Hmm.
speed with which cell phones became everywhere.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like in the 90s, I used to make fun of people with cell phones. I thought it was silly. And it seemed like
Right.
somewhere around 2001, I woke up. I lived in LA then. I woke up and I looked out my window in Koreatown and I saw everybody on the street was walking and talking on their phone.
Hmm.
It literally, it seemed to me like overnight. I just thought, wow, we haven't had, we as a society, we haven't had this conversation. Is this necessary?
Hmm.
Does everybody need to have a cell phone at all times?
Right. Right.
Now it's a mute point.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I was just thinking about so I don't know who is the cat. I don't uh the singularity. Are you familiar with it's some sort of a concept that's explored in I think there was some science fiction writer.
Hmm.
Thermo Fingy, is that his name? I'm probably not getting that right. But it was the concept of humanity eventually kind of merging with technology.
Hmm.
Um, and and so the idea was that yeah, that eventually we would just kind of merge with technology and become one with it. And it's a trip how we think of that as something that's going to happen in the future, but you could really say we're already kind of moving in that direction. The momentum is already taking us there to some extent. Um, so I don't know, but it's one of those things where if we could have looked into, a crystal ball and seen what was happening with, the way we were kind of developing this sort of relationship to technology, for lack of a better word, then we would have been like, whoa, what happened? Why, this is the future. They're doing weird, they're developing a weird relationship with technology. As you mentioned, I mean, people go taking phones everywhere and things like that. I mean, I remember I guess we're about the same age, so maybe you can remember this. I remember we would laugh at people that would walk around with like cell phones on. I mean, it was like at first it was, you'd hear about doctors walking around with beepers, and I remember in the movie Caddyshack, you have the doctor with his beeper and everything, and then those were the only people that needed it. I guess it wasn't a cell phone at that time, but they were the only ones that needed a beeper. And
Right.
then we laugh at people like I had a cousin that had a beeper, and I'd be like, you don't even have a job. Why do you need people to contact you? That doesn't make sense. Um, and then, but in time, he would have been like, he was laughing at me for,
Hmm.
not having, a cell phone.
Right.
Um, so I don't know. I mean, we look now, we think that's the normal way to roll, but I don't know if we could have looked into the future. If somebody had read that in a, I don't know, Bradbury or saw it on a Twilight Zone, they would have thought, "Whoa, that's a strange vision of the future that, that we will, be doing that way." Um, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's something you've thought about in terms of like, do you look at it in terms of a relationship that we have with technology, or just I don't know? Because we don't. I don't know. I don't hear most people thinking of it in those terms, but that you could think of it like that.
Well, yeah, a friend of mine told me that theory somewhere in the 1990s, and at the time I thought that's ridiculous.
Right.
But I obviously never forgot it, and I kept thinking about it and watching the evolution of technology throughout the 2000s, and I realized, at some point our ancestors, thousands of years ago,
Mm-hmm.
they picked up a walnut and they're used to trying to open it with their hands, and they're like, this is a nuisance, right? And so somebody picked up a rock and slammed it onto the walnut, and that's the beginning of technology. And the beginning of technology is laziness. It's us
Right.
being
Right.
lazy, and
Mm-hmm.
every technological advance is designed to do more work that we used to do. Like the door open, an automatic door opening. Why do we need a door to open automatically? We can't even reach out and push a door open at the store.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it makes sense that like AI in that view, AI makes sense. At some point, the technology is going to say, this is absurd.
Mhm.
We're superior, right? The technology is superior. Why are we serving this flesh and bone that that so lazy? So obviously, can't. I'm sure you remember a while ago, people predicted the future human being was just going to look like a potato with like one arm to work the remote control and maybe another arm to shovel food into.
Mhm. Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
that's why, yeah, I mean, that's why I feel like the drive for conformity, which I think is really pushed by big tech, um, is to turn us into circuits. You can't have circuits in a machine that are supposed to all operate the same way. You can't have them thinking differently.
Right. Right.
So
Hmm.
it's yeah, that's what I think's going on, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's bad news for human beings.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
again, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, I was going to say, I mean, and I maybe drifting away a little bit from what you're saying, but I mean, you hear about like AI, people concerned that, oh, robots are going to take our jobs. Um, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if what will happen in response to that will be people saying, okay, if we can't beat them, we need to join them, meaning we need to continue to merge
Mm.
with technology and we need to kind of, you know what I'm saying, bring the robots into us and roboticize ourselves in some way. So that would really be a weird situation. But yeah, I mean, that may be I don't know, that may, again, drifting away a little bit from what you're saying, but yeah.
No, I can see that happening.
Mhm.
I mean, there are people right now that just go along with it. They just,
Oh, yeah.
they're told, they're told, I don't know, in a short amount of time, that show, The Office, is going to be banned. It's
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
it's gonna be banned, and there will be people that will just go along with it, even
Yeah.
though when The Office was being offensive, it was always doing so to kind of open a conversation about, usually it was Michael's behavior is very poor,
Right.
and the show itself corrected him. Almost all these shows that are now considered taboo or whatever,
Mhm.
they almost always corrected the characters who were behaving poorly.
Mhm.
But we can't even just have that conversation in that context. It's just got to be removed. Michael, the character in The Office, is a misogynist. Uh,
Mhm.
Therefore, we don't want to see a misogynist on the television, so get rid of it. And people just go along with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't. There's no consensus of adults standing up and very loudly saying, "I'd like to make that decision for myself.
Right. Right.
I'd like to decide whether or not I'm going to watch that."
Mhm.
So your contention makes sense to me that,
Right.
at some point somebody's going to say, let's stick this microchip in our brain and whatnot, and start that. They're not even consciously moving towards the union with technology,
Right. Right.
but it's just that is a step that needs to happen, and they're going to do it without thinking about it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned that just the important thing though is people just making up their own mind. I mean, I'm fine with people disagreeing, and I'm fine with saying they don't like a particular thing or whatever. But when we all have an official opinion, and we all have to decide this, you know, we all don't like this thing, so we nobody can watch it.
Yeah.
That's when the problems begin. Um, so yeah, yeah, we'll, we'll see how how it works out. We will see. Um, yeah.
Well, that's fascinating, and like you said, it's a little bit depressing, but it's better to be aware, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, let's go back a little bit to your hybrid of post-apocalyptic and crime fiction. I'm just curious, are you keeping up at all with what's happening in the indie crime fiction scene these days?
A little bit. I mean, just in terms of reading books that are out there, yeah, to
Yeah.
some extent. Yeah.
What do you think of the direction crime fiction is going in right now?
I don't know if it is really going in. I mean, well, okay, it kind of goes back to what I was saying before in terms of trying to move it into the post-apocalyptic world. I don't know. In some ways, I feel like the reason that the thing that compels me to try to move it into the future is that I don't feel like we are living in an age that is conducive to gritty crime fiction.
Huh.
Uh, I think we live in a world that is too clean and too uncomfortable with the ugly side of humanity. And a post-apocalyptic world would be a world where all of the layers have been peeled back, all of the politeness is gone, all of the veneer of cleanliness and kindness is removed, and we're back to some seriously dark, gritty stuff. You know, I mean, like if you go back, even if you just look at movies in terms of like the I don't know the early '70s and movies like French Connection
Mhm.
and things like that. Um, that was a product of that world. That was a product of a time that was an ugly, or if you just look at like the New York movies of the '70s, that was a product of a very gritty, ugly world that showed the dark, unpleasant side of humanity. And, you know, once you clean that up, you don't get that. You can't have Dirty Harry anymore. You can, or I don't remember if that took place in New York, but you can't have Taxi Driver in 1996. You can't have or Mean Streets or something like that. Um, you need a certain amount of grit. You need. I mean, I don't know if that was what your question was. I think I've drifted away a little bit from your question, but that's kind of getting into why I would like to see a sort of shift in direction um, with crime, with at least with my crime fiction. I
Mhm.
don't, if it starts a trend, that would be cool, but
Well, it is. Yeah, it's an unusual direction, I guess. I haven't seen it very much, if at all. Um, you, no, I think you said it's interesting. You said the world is not gritty enough now,
right. Well,
but
maybe a little bit with COVID stuff might be gritty in a different way, but I don't know.
yeah, I think it is. It's very gritty. If you hear about some of the things that young folks are doing now, young folks are always trying to outdo the previous generation in the
Mm,
crazy stuff that they do. And if they've, I always think, well, they've run out of stuff.
right,
But
right,
I was just talking to somebody who told me that, for instance, teenagers are actively seeking STDs. Like this is now some sort of badge of honor to get an STD, and they seek a specific one.
Mm.
So I'm assuming then that they date people. That's part of the process now. Is they ask, well, do you have chlamydia or VD? It used to be, are
Yeah.
you a Scorpio or a Virgo?
Yeah.
Now it's oh, do you have HPV? Okay, well, that'll work. I think that the world is extremely gritty now, but I think you're right that there is this conscious attempt by a lot of people to put a veneer over it and
Right.
say, well, we all, like you said, we all have Netflix, we all have cell phones. The world is great. So why would you write about terrible things happening to people?
Right.
Even though if you look at crime blotters every day, or if you talk to police officers about the cases that they're working on, it's even 10 years ago, I went to talk with CJ Edwards in Indianapolis. He was working in the sex crimes unit, and one of his colleagues came over, a woman detective, and she started telling me stories that nobody has ever attempted to write a piece of fiction that comes close to the nastiness that
Oh.
that really happens in the world. And now it seems like in some sectors of crime fiction,
Hmm.
they want to, you can't go there as a
Right.
crime fiction writer. You can't go there where this woman was talking about,
Hmm.
but you can lean that way. At least
Hmm.
it used to be 10 years ago, when Pulp Modern started and
Hmm.
Thuglit was around and Beat to a Pulp and Pulp Metal and Crime Factory, all those, they let you uh, get pretty
Hmm.
gritty. But now I just kind of feel like there's a push away from even hinting at it.
Yeah. So maybe a better way to put it is um, that okay, if we you go back to the early 70s and that period, or again, even as you say, relatively recently, 10 years ago or so, although I would say it was probably even more pronounced way back in the 70s. Um, there were so many people who were a part of that world and they couldn't escape it. Right
Hmm.
now you can escape it. Right
Yeah.
now you can sort of live in a world where you can get out of the old New York and you can now go to Times Square that's controlled by Disney and whatnot. Or you can you can now live in the safe suburbs and you can read cute little crime fiction about forensics and then nothing wrong with it, but the kind of nerdy, kind of sciency crime fiction. It's not so much about the grittiness and bad people doing horrible things. Um, so I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is it's easier to escape it. And then again, again, getting back into post-apocalyptic, in that world, you can't escape it. You can't go back to the suburbs and just relax in your gated community and read your cute little crime fiction. Um, so I don't know. That's kind of my take. Although I'm not sure. I mean, are you talking more about crime fiction in a broad sense, or more specifically, sort of our little corner of crime?
Well, I think that what we call for one thing, our little corner, there's a
Mm.
lot of people there who don't think it's our little corner anymore.
Yeah.
Um, and they want to, it used to be, I know you remember this, it used to be there was what we called crime fiction, and then there was the mystery crowd. And the mystery crowd was that older, more conservative set that liked Agatha Christie and, cats solving crime. Uh, which is fine. I'm for everybody having what they want to read.
Yeah.
But I think that this kind of sector of the indie scene
Mhm.
wants to get rid of everything else, and
Right.
they just want the kind of sterilized. It's if they say the word, if they write the word fuck like 20 times in their story, that makes it edgy, hardcore, you know.
Right.
Um, but the substance of what they're writing, it's not the same as what we were writing 10 years ago. Or and some of us, I'm sure we're still writing that, but I'm saying it's not considered as acceptable. I mean, I've seen active campaigns to get rid of writers who are writing things that go beyond their boundaries, beyond the boundaries that certain people have set up.
Right.
And again, it's like they want to write that kind of fiction. Please, go ahead and do it,
Sure.
but don't tell other people what they can write or what they can read. That's where I have a problem.
Hmm.
It's, again, which is why your story, the unmade future, or excuse me, unnamed future.
Hmm.
I think it even, you know, I think it kind of taps into that idea that that there's this drive for just one way of doing things
Hmm.
that can't be good.
Right. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Like, how does innovation come from that?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I didn't mean to unload that on you.
No, no, no. Yeah. I mean, huh, I don't know. Maybe I've been kind of naive and not fully aware of that all of that was happening. I mean, I knew there was just vaguely some disagreement about some things, but I didn't know about like campaigns or anything like that. Hmm. But yeah, um, but yeah, as you say, you got to let the disagreement just be what it is. You can't, you try to rope people into unity, then we really have some problems.
Yeah, I think so. All right. Well, I think we gotta wrap this one up. But it was good talking to you,
Yeah,
Copper,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it
yeah.
was a fascinating conversation. And I think we definitely need to have another conversation in the future. Maybe when some of this post-apocalyptic
Hmm.
crime fiction has been released.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look forward to it, man.
Okay.
Great.